خادم الحرمين الشريفين بتقديم دعم فوري للجيش وقوى الأمن الداخلي وسائر القوى الأمنية الشرعية قوامه $1 مليار.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's headlines. A Higher Relief Council delegation headed by Major General Mohammed Khair heads to Arsal to inspect the damage caused by clashes between the Lebanese army and Islamist militants. An Israeli delegation arrives in Cairo for indirect negotiations with Palestinian factions on bringing an end to more than a month of violence in Gaza. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warns Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki not to cause trouble as he is resisting growing calls for his resignation amid a political crisis. A Higher Relief Council delegation headed by Major General Mohammed Khair headed to the northeastern town of Arsal to inspect the damage caused by clashes between the Lebanese army and Islamist militants. This is a preliminary inspection, and in 24 hours, Army Commander General Jean Ahwaji will task a committee with surveying the area. Ahwaji also stressed that the military institution saved Lebanon from a deadly sectarian rift, revealing that the Islamist gunmen were preparing for a tragedy. The fighting in Arsal broke out on August 2nd when jihadists from Syria attacked army and police posts in the town after the arrest of a militant accused of belonging to Syrian al-Qaeda-affiliated Nusra Front. During the fighting, at least 35 soldiers and policemen were seized by the militants and are still being held hostage. The Lebanese army began deploying in Arsal on Friday after Muslim Scholars Committee officials negotiated a truce that saw jihadists withdraw. Bashir Khudr, the governor of Baalbek and Hermel, said the residents of Arsal were the victims of terrorism. British Ambassador to Lebanon, Mr. Tom Fletcher, says it is necessary for rival Lebanese leaders to come together to face rising threats. Following talks with future movement leader Saad Hariri, the diplomat called for wisdom and courage to face together these threats and reiterated that Britain stands in solidarity with the Lebanese people.
Here today on my first day back in Lebanon after a summer break to very much welcome the decision by former Prime Minister Hariri to return to Lebanon at this time. We are in a difficult moment for Lebanon and for the region. It is a moment of mounting threats to the country and to its people. And so it is even more important than ever that Lebanon's leaders come together in a spirit of tolerance, moderation, consensus, and with the necessary wisdom and courage to face together these threats. And as ever, we are clear that Britain's role is to stand in solidarity with the Lebanese people. In the coming days, I hope to be speaking further about ways in which we will show that when Lebanon is in trouble, Britain will remain on Lebanon's side. I look forward to meeting with other leaders in the coming days, in the coming period, as we set out the ways in which we will lend our support as Lebanon circles the wagons in order to keep the conflict out of the country.
Progressive Socialist Party leader MP Walid Jumblat says it has become necessary to seriously control the flow of Syrian refugees into Lebanon, given the recent unrest in Arsal and the likelihood that the Syrian conflict will not end anytime soon. Jumblat noted that the camps will have positive repercussions on the country's security and will help organize the spread of aid to the displaced. In addition, the MP proposed that one of the security agencies, such as the General Security, could be tasked with monitoring the flow of the refugees into the country through inquiring about their status and the reason of their stay. Several officials have voiced their rejection to establish refugee camps, warning it may be a precursor to the eventual naturalization of the refugees. Contract workers at Électricité du Liban have blocked the entrance to the company's headquarters in Beirut's Ashrafiyeh in protest of a cabinet decision to reduce the number of jobs. After preventing full-time employees from entering the building, the contract workers burnt car tires inside the courtyard. The national news agency reports that a strike and a march to the Energy Ministry will also be carried out tomorrow. Palestinians have accepted Egypt's proposal for a 72-hour ceasefire in Gaza, which began last night. Israeli tanks, armored personnel vehicles and soldiers were deployed near Gaza border in the morning. Almost 12 hours into the truce, the skies over Gaza remain calm, with no reports of violations on any side and signs of life emerging from the war-torn coastal enclave, which is home to 1.8 million Palestinians. Residents began returning to their damaged homes to see what belongings they could salvage, and fishermen cast nets out to the sea. An Israeli delegation has arrived in the Egyptian capital of Cairo for indirect negotiations with Palestinian factions on bringing an end to more than a month of violence that has devastated the enclave of Gaza. The Palestinian delegation was already in the Egyptian capital and locked in talks with Egyptian intelligence mediators, who will relay their demands to the Israeli negotiators. The Israeli delegation landed in Cairo in the morning, just hours after the 72-hour ceasefire came into effect. This is the second round of indirect talks to take place in Cairo. Egypt urged the warring sides to use the three-day lull to reach a comprehensive and permanent ceasefire, which they failed to do last week. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said it would give the two sides another chance to agree on a durable ceasefire, while stressing the importance of addressing the underlying grievances on both sides. Hamas has said any permanent agreement must include Israel lifting its 8-year blockade on Gaza. As bombs explode in Gaza, Palestinian teenager Farah Bakr grabs her smartphone or laptop before ducking for cover to tap out tweets that capture the drama and fear around her. The 16-year-old prolific posts on Twitter have made her a social media sensation through the month-old conflict. Bakr's posts and videos provides her followers with a live feed of blaring ambulance sirens, in addition to blasts from Israeli strikes and shelling attacks.
I'm trying to tell them the truth about what is happening in Gaza, because I see that most of Western media supports Israel, and tell them that Israelis are the victim and Israel is under fire, and we started the war in Israel. But I'm trying to tell them that the occupied city can't start the war on the occupiers. And I'm trying to tell them what exactly happens in Gaza to make them change their minds and know who's the victim. I'm trying to do something special. Most of the televisions and radios, it says that how many people died and what they bombed and what is happening. I'm trying to tell the world what I feel and what is happening in my area, and trying to catch videos of the bombs and the smoke that I see to do something special and make people feel like they live with me. Most of the time I feel unsafe because this war is against civilians, so I feel like they can bomb my house at any moment, and especially because I show the truth about what's happening in Gaza to the world. So this can make many people against Israel, so I feel that like they can bomb my house at any moment. But I see that this is the only way I can help Gaza. I mean, showing what is happening here. So I sometimes tweet while I'm crying or too scared, but I say that I should not stop and try my best to show the world what exactly happens.
Coming up next, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah talk about joint efforts to counter Islamist militancy across the Middle East. Stay tuned. Welcome back. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt and Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah have met to talk about joint efforts to counter Islamist militancy across the Middle East, including the turmoil now shaking Iraq. The two leaders are sworn enemies of the Muslim Brotherhood. They see the recent success of militants in Iraq as a threat to their stability and undermining security in the region. Sisi spokesperson Ihab Badawi said the two leaders agreed to work together to promote the true and moderate values of Islam that reject extremism and terrorism. The visit is Sisi's first since his election to the presidency this year. The pair met on King Abdullah's plane in Cairo in June, and Riyadh regards the former Egyptian army leader as one of its closest regional allies. King Abdullah has also called for a donor conference for Egypt, expected to take place either this year or early next year, to provide further support to the most populous country in the Arab world. Iraq's Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has resisted growing calls for his resignation and accused the country's new president of violating the constitution, plunging the government into political crisis as it battles the Islamic State group. Reporters say Maliki deployed security forces and armed groups across the capital, Baghdad, shortly before his defiant speech on Sunday, despite Maliki's announcement that he intended to run for a third term as prime minister. Reports say a bloc comprising Iraq's biggest Shia parties is close to nominating a new prime minister, citing the deputy speaker of parliament. If that happens, Maliki would have to step aside. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says the formation of an Iraqi government is critical for stability and expresses hope that Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki will not obstruct the process.
We believe that the government formation process is critical in terms of sustaining the stability and calm in Iraq. And our hope is that Mr. Maliki will not stir those waters. One thing all Iraqis need to know, that there will be little international support of any kind whatsoever for anything that deviates from the legitimate constitutional process that is in place and being worked on now. They need to finish that and give a new government an opportunity to be voted on and move forward.
And now for news around the world in brief. Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan wins the country's first direct presidential election on Sunday and issued a message of unity, saying he would be a president for everyone. With 99% of ballot boxes counted, Erdogan had 51.95% of the vote, according to figures from the state news agency, which had reporters at ballot counting stations across the country. Firefighters have rescued 24 people from the Joker's Jinx roller coaster that got stuck on the track at Six Flags America in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. The riders were stuck at some 45 feet from the ground in the roller coaster train as firefighters brought up fire ladders to evacuate them. The World Health Organization says an Ebola vaccine should be ready for public use by 2015. There is currently no vaccine or cure for the virulent disease, which has ravaged parts of West Africa and killed more than 900 since its outbreak in March. Ukrainian government forces are preparing for the final stage of recapturing the city of Donetsk from pro-Russian separatist rebels after making significant gains that have divided rebel forces. A military spokesman said Kiev's forces had now cut Donetsk off from the other main rebel-held city of Luhansk on the border with Russia. UN agencies say that more than 1,100 people have been killed since the conflict erupted in eastern Ukraine, including troops, rebel fighters, and civilians. Troops have been steadily closing in on the pro-Russian separatists since a week-long ceasefire ended on July 1st. The army's planned move on the city comes as the mayor of Donetsk said that overnight shelling struck a high-security prison, killing one convict and allowing 106 others to escape. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. A Higher Relief Council delegation headed by Major General Mohammed Khair heads to Arsal to inspect the damage caused by clashes between the Lebanese army and Islamist militants. An Israeli delegation arrives in Cairo for indirect negotiations with Palestinian factions on bringing an end to more than a month of violence in Gaza. And finally, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry warns Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki not to cause trouble as he is resisting growing calls for his resignation amid a political crisis. That's it from us here for today. We'll be back again tomorrow for more updates. Take care.
وجه خادم الحرمين الشريفين بتقديم